Hi everybody and welcome to book club. It is Saturday night and people are sleeping, so I'm sorry if I'm a little low, but I'm trying not to wake people up. So in this episode of book club we will be covering February 11th, 1953 to February 14th, 1953. I know that's not a huge span of time, but a lot of stuff happens and we get a lot of introduction into who Leo is. I will tell you who Leo is in a few minutes, and a lot of reading straight from the book because sticky notes. Yeah, I know. And I'm on webcam again. Next week I will be back on iPad. We are starting 20 years later from where last book club was. Yeah, I know. Crazy, right? We are in Moscow, February 11th, 1953. We're introduced to Jura and Arkady. Jura, not sure. I'm sorry I'm butchering these names. I promise I'm trying, but I'm pretty sure it's Arkady. Jura and Arkady are playing in the snow, and Arkady, who is the younger brother, won the snowball fight, but Jura couldn't have that, so he threw a revenge snowball at Arkady and hit him right in the face and knocked his tooth out. So Arkady ran from Jura, and Jura immediately regretted it. He's like, why couldn't I have let the kid win like one when I could have, beat him all these other times in the future? So he feels really, really bad about it, and Arkady runs away, and this is the last time we will see Arkady, us, and Jura. Now it is the 14th of February 1953. Happy Valentine's Day. I don't think they had Valentine's Day back in communist Russia. Soviet Union? Yeah, it was the Soviet Union back then, Carly. We meet Leo, I'm going to do this, Stepanovich Demidov. Demidov? Am I doing that right? Leo Demidov. We're going to call him Leo for the rest of this book club series. He is a member of the MGB, which is the State Security Force. We learn that Arkady is dead and that the official story is that he was hit by a train and it was a tragic accident with no question of blame. And then we get insight into how Leo thinks, because the story is obviously told from his perspective, but like a third person, but following him. So we know what he's thinking in his head. Here is something that Leo says/thinks. The loss of a son was heartbreaking for the family and relatives, but bluntly, it was meaningless at the national level. Careless children, unless they were careless with their tongues, were not state security concerns. Now, I find this extremely interesting because it's like, oh, kid gets hit by a train, not a national problem. Kid says something against Stalin or the MGB or the Soviet Union, that's a problem. Like, you could be 5 years old and what you say is worse than dying. It really gives you a hint into I can never live like this. I'm just saying. Not that anyone like can, but like I'd be executed so fast it wouldn't even be funny. Here's the problem. Arkady's family is telling people that he was murdered, but they don't have any proof, and they don't know who did it. And of course, that would seem weird in this time, except what's happening over there is that in Stalin's Soviet Union, there is no crime. Crime doesn't exist. So saying that someone was murdered is already a huge problem because, hello, crime doesn't happen here. And another problem is that Arkady's father, Fyodor Andreev, am I doing that okay? If you're Russian, I'm so sorry. Teach me. He is a low-ranking member of the MGB, and he's bringing the MGB in disrepute because the MGB is all like, there's no crime, we live in an unofficial paradise. But Fyodor is saying, my kid was murdered, so how you can't have both, you just can't. So now it kind of switches gears a little bit and we really learn a lot about Leo. We learn that Leo never intended to join the MGB. He was in the military during the Great Patriotic War, which, if I am correct, I believe that is what we call World War II. I'm pretty sure, because World War I was like really, would have been too early because he's only 30 years old. Oh, keep that in mind, Leo's only 30 years old. He was recruited to OMSBON, the Independent Motor Rifle Brigade, for special tasks. So he was taken to the Central Institute of Physical Culture. He was handpicked for his athleticism and physical prowess. He was taken to the Maitishi training camp. Again, so sorry. He was taught close combat, weapons training, low altitude parachuting, and use of explosives. So Leo is super skilled. The MGB used to be called the NKVD. So battalions were under the NKVD, and they weren't military. They were super secret missions behind enemy lines. And basically, Leo feels like he's doing nothing work now because he's going to talk to a family whose kid was run over by a train, but they're saying he was murdered. But we also learn that Leo was a poster boy for Soviet liberation of German-occupied territory. He was awarded the Order of Suvorov Second Class. He was level-headed, had military success, had good looks, and above all, his absolute and sincere belief in his country. This is extremely important to remember, that Leo has an absolute and sincere belief in his country. Keep that in your head. But also keep in your head that Leo secretly enjoyed the independence of those operations, and he liked the impression that his fate was in his hands. So secretly he's all like, oh, I love being independent, but at the same time he's like, I believe absolute and sincerely in what we're doing. So already there's kind of a rift in the back of his mind between what he feels in his heart and what he knows he needs to be. So the one fundamental pillar of Stalin's Soviet Union was that there is no crime. Okay? None. There is no crime. Few people believe this absolutely. There were blemishes. This was a society still in transition, not yet perfect. As an MGB officer, it was Leo's duty to study the works of Lenin. In fact, it was every citizen's duty. He knew that social excesses, crime, would wither away as poverty and want disappeared. They hadn't reached that plateau yet. Things were stolen, drunk disputes became violent, there were the Urki, the criminal gangs, but people still had to believe that they were moving forward toward a better state of existence. To call this murder was a giant step backward. Leo had been taught by his superior officer, his mentor, Major Kuzmin, about the trials of 1937, where the accused had been briefed by Stalin that they had lost faith. Enemies of the party were not merely saboteurs, spies, and wreckers of industry, but doubters of the party line, doubters of society which awaited them. Applying that rule, Fyodor, Leo's friend and colleague, had indeed become an enemy. Leo's mission was to quash any unfounded speculation, to guide them back from the brink. Talk of murder had a natural drama which no doubt appealed to certain types of fanciful people. If it came to it, he'd be harsh. The boy had made a mistake for which he paid with his life. No one else needed to suffer for his carelessness. Maybe that was too much. He needn't go so far. This could be resolved tactfully. They were upset, that was all. But be patient with them. They weren't thinking straight. Present the facts. He wasn't here to threaten them, at least not immediately. He was here to help them. He was here to restore faith. So I think that in and of itself is self-explanatory. I mean, just to doubt was to become an enemy of the state, and he's there to restore faith in them, that the system works. There's no murder. Like, he's going there to tell them that. It's just very insensitive and ridiculous. So Leo meets with the family, and he tells them Arkady wasn't murdered. There is no murder. He can't be murdered. There is no murder. Fyodor tells Leo that Arkady was found naked. So let's delve back in the book to Post-it 3. So let's start with what Leo says. Arkady was caught by a passing train. His death was an accident, a terrible accident. Fyodor. Then why was he naked? Why was his mouth stuffed with dirt? Leo tried to fathom what had just been said. The boy was naked? That'd be the first time he'd heard of it. He opened the report. The boy was found clothed. Now that he read the line again, it struck him as an odd stipulation, but there it was. The boy was clothed. He continued to scan the document. Having been dragged along the ground, his mouth contained dirt. Again, I think we can take from this that was an odd stipulation, is the back of Leo's mind, the same part of his mind that's saying, yay independence, yay the fate is in our own hands, is saying, well, that's weird. Why would it say the boy was close? That's weird. But he shoves that down and turns his front brain on and is like, big bad MGB agent. So then there's an adamant old woman who we learn is, I believe, Fyodor's mother. She mentions that Taras Kuprin found him naked, yet official statement says the boy is fully clothed. So the woman says the report is a lie. Now, that is like the worst thing you could say right to an MGB agent. The report is a lie. Because think about what that implies. That implies that there's this huge, big, bad, or the big good state that stops all crime is lying. That is doubt, which makes you, adamant old lady, an enemy of the state. So you gotta give her props, because she is literally like laying her life on the line just to give this information, and giving her opinion is laying her life on the line. It's also brought to light that there is new evidence. Galina Shaparina comes over, and Fyodor says that she saw a man with AndCarlyy. When Leo questions her, she says she saw a rail worker and no boy. Now Fyodor is shocked, and Fyodor's mother, who's the old woman, yells to the woman. So now you know that Galina Shaparina is in front of the MGB agent. She's not going to dispute what's in the report and what she knows is in the report. So she just says, nope, it was a rail worker and there was no boy. I don't know what they're talking about. Leo makes it clear that this has to stop. This talk of murder has to absolutely stop. And Fyodor tells him, very chokingly, just to get the words out, that his son's death was a terrible accident. And Leo leaves. Now, Jora tells Leo about the snowball and how guilty he feels, and Leo says it's no one's fault, because he honestly believes it's no one's fault, even though you can already see there's something itching that doesn't seem right. So now we switch over to the village of Kimov, 160 kilometers north of Moscow, and it's the same day, February 14th, and the two characters we're going to mainly talk about here are AndCarlyy Brodsky and Mikhail Zinoviev. Did I do good? AndCarlyy broke into Mikhail's barn for shelter. Now at this point we don't know that they know each other, but then it kind of breaks off. I really like the writing of this book. It kind of breaks off into backstory and then comes back, because we just think Mikhail sees that his barn's open and he goes to stab the intruder. But then it switches very fast and we realize they were best friends, and AndCarlyy is a fugitive. He thought Mikhail would help him escape, but Mikhail, he values his family too much. So he came up with a deal to let him sleep in the barn. So when Mikhail goes up to the open barn, he already knows AndCarlyy's in there, and he holds a pitchfork over him. And he considered killing his best friend, because if he killed his best friend, then his family would be safe. They could report the fugitive, and that's it. But he couldn't kill him. And he begs for AndCarlyy's forgiveness, and AndCarlyy says there's nothing to forgive. Like, he doesn't blame him for almost killing him just to protect his family. So when Mikhail goes up back to his wife's looking out, and I don't know if she says, did you do it? But she wanted him to kill AndCarlyy, and Mikhail saw it as a weakness not to kill him or help him. And I'm sorry, it's never a weakness not to kill someone, in my opinion. If you can't kill someone, that's fine, just, it's not a weakness, you just couldn't commit murder. So now we're back in Moscow the same day, and it's time for Post-it 4. Okay, so now we learn that Leo was originally pursuing AndCarlyy Brodsky and, watching over him because he thought he was a spy. And when Leo went to do his stuff, he kind of let his guard down with Brodsky, but when Leo went to do the AndCarlyy stuff, Brodsky got away. So now he's trying to clean up that mess, And we get this little bit of insight. Better to let 10 innocent men suffer than one spy escape. I think that's extremely disturbing. You know, better to let 10 innocent men suffer than one spy escape. I think that shows you the twisted logic here. In this chapter, we see a lot of twisted logic of the MGB. And also we learn that there's a presumption of guilt. Now, if you live in the United States, and I believe like the UK, I don't know, but we have a presumption of innocence. But in the Soviet Union, in Stalin's Soviet Union, it's a presumption of guilt. And if you know anything about Joseph Stalin, that doesn't really surprise you. We're going to go to Post-it 5. Major Cheeseman had quickly guessed the reason for his protégé's reservations. During Leo's own military career, he had been treated by field doctors for numerous injuries, and clearly some kind of war camaraderie was holding him back. I believe Anatoly Brodsky, he's a vet, but that's the connection there. Cheeseman reminded Leo that sentimentality could blind a man to the truth. Those who appear the most trustworthy deserve the most suspicion. Leo recognized it as a play on Stalin's well-known aphorism, trust but check. Stalin's words had been interpreted as check on those we trust. So, like, you can't win. If the state trusts you, then you get super scrutinized, but if the state doesn't trust you, you get super scrutinized. Like, how does that work? And now, Post-it 6, we're going to delve into the deep, what I find almost comical paranoia of the state security, the MGB. Since those who weren't trusted were scrutinized with the same vigor as those who were, it meant that there was, at least, a kind of equality. The duty of an investigator was to scratch away at innocence until guilt was uncovered. If no guilt was uncovered, then they hadn't scratched deep enough. In the case of Brodsky, the question wasn't whether foreign diplomats met with him because he was a vet, but rather had the suspect become a vet in order that foreign diplomats could openly meet with him. Why did he establish his practice within walking distance of an American embassy? And why, shortly after he opened this practice, did several employees from the American embassy obtain pets? He's like a vet. Finally, why was it that the pets of foreign diplomats seemed to require more frequent attention than pets belonging to a typical citizen? Cheeseman had been the first to agree that there was a comical aspect to all this, but it was precisely this disarming quality that had made him uneasy. The innocence of the circumstances felt like a brilliant disguise. It felt like the MGB was being laughed at. There were a few more serious crimes than that. So there are a few more serious crimes than laughing at the MGB, but not a lot. This is extreme paranoia. We scratch away at innocence until guilt's uncovered. That doesn't even make sense. And if no guilt is uncovered, then you haven't scratched deep enough. But now I know my favorite number, and a number that seems to come up a lot in my life, is 106. But does the number come up a lot in my life because I'm super aware of it? Like, if my number was 253, would I notice 253 everywhere? That's kind of the logic that's going on behind here. Did the foreign diplomats get pets? The pets seem to require more frequent visits, as opposed to what? Like, if you weren't looking at Brodsky, would you notice how many foreign diplomats' pets are getting sick more often? You know? Do you see what I'm getting at there? I hope, because that was like a really good thing. So now we're going to move on to Post-it 7. Having considered the case and noted his mentor's observations, Leo made the decision that instead of arresting the suspect outright, they would have him followed, reasoning that if this citizen was working as a spy, then it was an opportunity to discover who he was working with and arrest them all in one swoop. Though he never said as much, he was uncomfortable making an arrest without more evidence. He was uncomfortable making an arrest without more evidence. Of course, this was a qualm he'd lived with throughout his professional life. He'd made many arrests knowing only the citizen's name and address and the fact that someone mistrusted them. A suspect's guilt became real as soon as they became a suspect. As for evidence, that would be acquired during their interrogation. But Leo was no longer a lackey who merely followed orders, and he decided to make use of his authority and do things a little differently. He was an investigator. He'd wanted to investigate. He had little doubt that he'd eventually arrest Anatoly Brodsky. He just wanted proof, some sign of guilt other than mere conjecture. In short, he wanted to feel okay about arresting him. In short, he wanted to feel okay about arresting him. This is huge. Okay, this is the second major sign we get that Leo is different than the others. First, a little flag went up about the boy is clothed, and it was like, oh. But no one else seems to care about evidence. But Leo does. Leo cares about evidence, and he wants more of it. He's different. He wants to feel okay about arresting someone. So this is the second major flag we get, that Leo is different. Leo's having independent thoughts, and that's very dangerous in this time. So he learns that Zina Murdosavna, who's in her 50s, allegedly liked Brodsky. And Leo had no problem writing what she said. He was a good man, large enough for her to see on her pad when he was interrogating her. She would die in the gulags if that made its way up. So the gulags are like this prison camp that you don't want to be at. Not that any prison camp you would want to be at. She told Leo about a friend Anatoly had in chemo. She felt guilty, but she did it. So as a sign of you did a good job, Leo hands her the incriminating paper and sees the contempt in her eyes towards him. And I think that affects him a little bit. I really do. I think that does affect him, that she has contempt towards him. Not like, oh my god, I'm so hurt, but like, huh. Now we are introduced to Vasily Ilyich Nikitin, who's 35, and he's second in command, but he's older than Leo. And we're gonna talk about him now in Post-it 8. Do you like my Post-its? I'm getting used to using them. I know it was a little rough in the beginning, but I'm getting used to this whole Post-it thing. Leo was interrupted by the return of his second-in-command, Vasily Ilyich Nikitin. Aged 35, 5 years older than Leo, Vasily had once been one of the MGB's most promising officers. Ruthless, competitive, he harbored no loyalties to anyone except the MGB. Leo privately considered those loyalties to be less about patriotism and more about self-interest. In his early days as an investigator, Vasily had signaled his dedication by denouncing his only brother for making anti-Stalinist remarks. Apparently, the brother had made a joke at Stalin's expense. Could you imagine if in the US, if you made fun of the president, you could get put in a prison camp? I'm pretty sure we all would live in prison camps. He'd been drunk at the time, celebrating his birthday. Vasily had written up the report, and the brother had been given a 20-year labor sentence. The arrest had worked in Vasily's favor until the brother escaped 3 years later, killing several guards and the camp doctor in the process. As he was never caught, the embarrassment of the incident hung around Vasily's neck. If he hadn't strenuously helped in the search for the fugitive, his career might not have survived. Instead, it survived in a much weakened state. With no more brothers left to denounce, Leo knew his deputy was on the lookout for some other way of getting back in favor. So this is a guy you gotta look out for, because he's ready. He wants his time back in the sun, and he's willing to take down anyone, apparently his own family, to get it. So yeah, harsh, you're turning your own brother. They're searching Brodsky's office, and Brodsky left a faux letter about Kiev, which Vasily finds, and he's like, oh my god, Leo, we gotta go to Kiev. And Leo's like, this obviously was left for us to find because everything's destroyed, and then this happens to be here in almost pristine condition, except Kiev is a little smudged, so we can just make it out. So Leo, he's looking in Brodsky's file, he's trying to find a connection to Kiev, and he finds it. He finds Mikhail's information in Brodsky's file, Kiev, and he leaves with the MGB for there. So I told you, a lot of stuff in this week's book club, even though we only covered like 2 chapters, maybe 3. So next week we are going to be covering February 15th to I don't know when. Hopefully it won't be this in-depth, but we had a lot of a lot of characters to really delve into. So don't forget, I want to hear from you, so make sure you leave comments. This is my favorite book, and I'm really excited to do this because I get to really read it in depth and really comprehend. I don't get to read critically anymore because I'm not in classes, and I miss reading critically. Good critically, or bad critically. We're allowed to do both because we don't live in still in the Soviet Union. Thank you so much for watching, and I will find somewhere where I can stand and do my book club because I kind of like this. Cassie kind of wants to get in on this a little bit, so we are going to, probably towards the end of the year, read 2 General Hospital books. The one is The Secret Life of Damien Spinelli, and the second one is Love in Maine. But thank you so much for watching. I will see you next week for book club, and we will find a better place to film at home because I like this. Alright, have a great day. Bye.